Hello Talha, hello Mohit. Hi. Hello everyone. Okay. Yes. It seems like we are finally live. Yes. Yes. Hi. Hello Talha. Hi Mohit. Yes, Talha, surely if this is something that you require, then yes, this will be given forward to the organizers. Yes, data science. All right. Okay. Okay. So, let's start with today's section actually. This session is not really related to data science, it's related to basic database. Now, in this particular session, what we're going to do is we're going to learn the basic DML statements that are there within SQL. Hello, Ravi. Hi, Nandini. Hi, Riyaj. Hello everyone. Okay, so what we're going to do in this session is we are very quickly going to go through DML. Now, many of you might have a doubt about why we are doing DML, right? It's because DML is one of the most basic set of statements that we can have in SQL. Now, whenever we've got SQL, we need to ensure that we know exactly what the different types of statements are and what are the differences between all of these statements. So we'll just quickly go through this course wherein we are actually going to go through what the DML statements are, what are the various types of DML statements, etc. So let's just quickly start the session. Also, before starting the session, I want to tell you all that if you have any questions in between the session, please put them up because after I explain each and every type of query within DML, I'll be pausing to just scroll through the chat that is here and just checking whether anyone has any doubts or not. So if anyone has any doubts anywhere, please make sure to just, post them onto the live chat given here. Also, if you're posting any queries or questions apart from DML statements, I might not be able to answer them right now, but yes, I might be able to answer them in some future sessions that we take regarding those topics asked there. All right, so let's quickly get started. And before I start, let me just greet all of the newcomers. Hi, Stadiar. Hi, Amir. Hello, everyone. All right, so let's get started. Now, the first topic that we are concerned with here in this particular session is going to be DML. We are going to understand exactly what DML is. We are going to understand the components that are a part of DML and what is the difference between DML and DDL. This is a concept that I find most people have a doubt in what is DML and what is DDL, which is going to quickly resolve this particular issue. Next, we're going to look into what the three basic DML statements are. Please note I'm constantly saying basic DML statements because there are a few DML statements that are there apart from this also, but there is some contention regarding whether they are actual DML or not because they syntactically look like they are a part of DDL, but they are implemented with DML statements. So since they are a contention based topic, I have not taken them up in this particular session. Here we'll only be looking at the very basic set of statements, which is insert, update and delete. Right? So please be sure that you stay tuned here if you have any doubts, any queries regarding insert, update or delete statements. So let's just very quickly get started here. Yes. Okay. So firstly, let's look into DML. Now, DML is data manipulation language. It is a part of the language that we know as SQL. So, what is SQL then? SQL is structured query language. It is exactly what it says it is. Voice comes sometimes like tree. Wow, that's a very descriptive sound here. Anyways, it could be that there is a slight buzzing. I'll just make a few changes here very quickly to ensure that there is no more buzzing. I hope the sound issue has been resolved. Yes, okay. So, SQL actually stands for Structured Query Language. All right. Now, this is what it says it is. It is a language that helps us query data, right? A language that is helping us query data, and the query is being set up in a structured manner. All right. So this is what SQL means. Now, SQL is the most basic form of communicating with data in the database. It is the language of the database. So the database will only understand this particular language. Rather, I should change my statement and say that for a long time, a database understood only this type of language. Right? So it's important for us before going into the complexities of database to understand how to actually communicate with the database, and SQL is the first initial mean of that. Now, SQL actually consists of various subsets of queries. We've got DML, we've got DDL, we've got DQL, and we've got TCL. These are the very basic subsets of SQL wherein we can manipulate data, we can manipulate data structures. I'll be explaining this in just a minute. And we can then manipulate, or we can query any kind of results from the database. And lastly is transaction control language, wherein we can actually control all of these separate queries that are actually being performed on the database, and we can form a coordination between all of these queries such that the results or the events that are being carried out because of one query are not affecting any other part of the database. So these are the four basic parts of the database. Here we are going to be concentrating on DML only. Now, what does DML do? DML is actually responsible for manipulation of data in the database. Be very sure that you note this, that there is a constant emphasis on manipulation of data only. No other type of manipulation can be carried out by the DML statements. All right. And for the purpose of this particular session, what we'll be doing is we'll be implementing all of these components using MySQL. All right. So the MySQL interface is actually an open source interface, and that is one of the reasons, major reasons, that I'm going to be using it here. All right. So let us, before going into the depth, let us just quickly look at the types of DML statements. So most of us are already aware that we've got three types of DML statements. We've got the insert, the update, and the delete statement. In each of these different kinds of statements, there is a structure that has to be followed. And no, I'm not talking about the syntax. The syntax would be different. There is a separate structure that needs to be followed, and we'll be looking at that particular structure later on. Again, I would want to emphasize on the fact that all of these only help in manipulating or inserting or deleting data from the database. Nothing else will be affected by any of these statements. Next, let us look very quickly at what the difference is between a DML and a DDL statement, right? So when we look at DML and DDL statements, you will often see a confusing line that is written between DML and DDL statements, that DML statements manipulate data and DDL manipulate data structure. All right. Now, the reason I say this is confusing is because most learners miss out on this structure, right? So, what is this DML actually doing? DML is only going to work on specific data that is a part of the table, whereas DDL languages are going to work on the structure of the table. So if you've got a table, say I'll draw a very tiny table here. If you've got to draw this table, you will require DDL. If you need to write data within the table, or you need to change some data within the table, you will require DML. This is the basic difference that exists between DML and DDL. That is why all of the create statements, all of the alter statements, all of these become a part of DDL, whereas insert, update, and delete statement become a part of DML. So let us just quickly go through the pointers given here for differences between DML and DDL. First of all things, DML is data manipulation language. We can use this to add, update, or delete any data from within the database construct. So can you see we are only able to do all of these manipulations on the data which is present in the database construct. Next, let's look at DML. It's actually, I'm sorry, next let's look at the DDL statements. It actually stands for the data definition language, and it helps us to change the schema of all of the database elements. Now, when we say change the schema, we can create a new schema or we can modify or delete an existing schema. Lastly, the last difference that is there between both of these types of queries is the syntactical difference. Now, when we look at DML statements, we'll see that in DML statements, we use only the table name. In each and every DML statements, wherever we see later on, we'll only have the table name stated within the query, and there might or might not be a where clause depending upon what type of statement we are currently working with. On the other hand, when we look at DDL statements, we have a keyword called table. While we are doing the hands-on, we'll actually see this difference because we are going to use the create statement there. Alright, so there I'll show you exactly how DML and DDL are different from each other. Fine. Anyone having any doubts here? What means third line of DML? Yes. I hope, Kabir, you've understood the difference on the third line. And again, I'm repeating this that this will be further explained when we actually do the hands-on. All right. So in DML, please remember for now that in DML we use only the name of the table, whereas in DDL we are using the keyword called table. All right. And then we use the name of the table. We'll see that in some time. So next, let's go on to the insert statement. Now, this insert statement is a very interesting statement because it is used in 90% of your day-to-day activities. Like whenever you register for any social media account or e-commerce account, or now if you are registering for doctor's appointment, big bazaar appointments, or any other kind of appointments, you'll see that you've got a form to fill, right? Now, when you're filling this form, where is all of this data going? Where are they storing all of this data? They're actually storing it into your database. And how do they store it onto your database? Using an insert statement. All right. So let us just quickly look into what an insert statement is and how we're going to utilize it. So first of all things, insert statement will actually help you add data into an existing table of a database. So if this line is actually very important here because it means that if the table does not already exist in your database, you can't really add data to it. All right. So you can't just add data to a non-existing table. You need to create the table first and then you can add data to it. The next line states that any and all data that you're adding into the database is going to be in a row-wise manner. Now, rows are also known as tuples or tuples. So you'll have various pronunciation based upon who is going to be instructing you or where you're learning it. In any case, both of these words mean the same thing. They're the right way. All right. So you can either call them rows or you can call them tuples or you can call them tuples. All of them mean one single entity having different kinds of data within it. So they'll form a row of the table, right? So each and every time you're inserting data into any kind of database, you'll have to insert it in the form of complete rows. You can't just pick a cell and say, okay, this is where I want to insert data. That is not something you can do. And we'll see why later on. Right? Lastly, because we are using MySQL, this is a clause that I'm putting up here, that because we are using MySQL, each and every insert statement is set to auto commit by default. Now, what is auto commit? Right? Auto commit is actually a commit by default, I should say. So what is the commit statement? Now, commit statement is a statement that actually has to be executed in the database in order to ensure that whatever changes are made to the database are actually stored in the database. Right? In many cases, by default, the commit statement is not set to true. But in MySQL, it is set to true. This means that if you make any changes within the MySQL database, they will be automatically saved to your database. All right, so that is why I've written that, because we will not constantly be clicking on commit. Now, if you're using any other kind of database, for example, Oracle, you might have to click on commit constantly after each and every query that you execute. All right, but currently, because we're going to be using the CLI interface of MySQL, this is something that you would not have to do because this is set by default. What happens if you want to remove this? There is a statement for it. You can set auto commit to false. Right? So if you just set auto commit to false, it's actually going to help you remove that auto commit thing, and then none of your changes will be stored into the database till you don't explicitly execute this commit statement. So be very careful while you're working. All right, because if you remove the set auto commit and you do not actually execute this commit statement, there is a chance that you might lose some data or lose some changes. So next, let's look at the syntax of the insert statement. Now, the syntax of the insert statement is very simple. It has a few variations that we'll be seeing later on, but first let's just look at the basic syntax. So we've got the insert keyword, we've got the into keyword. Next, we've got this table name. So the insert and the into keyword have to be as they are. Please make a note that MySQL or SQL in general is not really case sensitive. So it does not matter if you're writing your queries in capitals or smalls or mixed cases. Everything is fine, right? Just make sure that the spellings of everything is proper, because there are some keywords here that have to be written as they are. So we've got insert and into, which are two of the keywords. Next, we've got the table name, which will reference any table that we actually need to insert the data into. Next, we've got the set of column names where we are actually inserting data. We'll be seeing two variations of these. Next, we've got the keyword of values. And lastly, we've got the set of values that we need to insert into our database. Be very sure that the columns and the values are given simultaneously. The reason I'm saying this is because each and every positional column and value are related to each other. This means that for this column 1, value 1 will be stored within that. In column 2, we'll have value 2 stored within, and similarly in column n, we'll have value n stored within it. So please make sure that you're actually putting up your columns in the same way with the same data types as your values. All right, so let us just quickly go on to the hands-on. Before that, I'll quickly just answer, ma'am, what is between Oracle database and MySQL? I think this is supposed to be what is the difference between Oracle database and MySQL. Uh, Currently, Oracle database and MySQL have very tiny differences between them. Like, for example, in MySQL, sometimes if you don't put a semicolon, depending upon the version, then it doesn't really matter. The queries would still execute. In MySQL, the queries are not going to execute without a semicolon. As you can see, even here, there is a semicolon, because since I'm using MySQL here for this demonstration, I will be showing it to you with MySQL. Apart from that, query-wise, there is no real difference. Yes, there are some additional functionalities with Oracle, because of which Oracle becomes slightly more heavier in nature, heavier on the system, like process-wise. And MySQL is a bit lightweight when in comparison to it, right? Apart from this, there are no real large differences between this, because now even MySQL is a part of the Oracle corporation. All right, so let's just quickly go on to the hands-on here. All right, let me just change, and yes, so this is what the MySQL command line interface looks like. And what we're going to do here is we are actually going to implement the three types of insert statements. All right, so let me very first insert my password because I've not done so already. So there is a password here which you need to set while you're actually installing your MySQL CLI or your MySQL server, right? So you enter the password, and as you can see here, what I've selected is the community server. Right, so this is just a generic server, and since this particular software, which is MySQL, for some time now has been a part of Oracle, that is why the Oracle's affiliate trademark also comes up here. Now, as you can see, we've got the MySQL prompt given here. So any and all queries that you want to write here will have to be given. Now, one thing that I've told you is that each and every value or data needs to be inserted into an existing table, right? One more thing that I would like to tell you is that every table has to exist within a given database. So we need to have a database, we need to select a database, and then lastly we need to create a table within that database. So let us do the first thing. Let us check what all databases we have. So we have the show databases query, which will show us a list of databases. All right, so as you can see here, we've got information schema, MySQL, performance schema, sys, test, and test1. Now, by default, you'll just have these first four databases here. The last two databases, as you can see, are something that I've created while testing this particular system. All right, so what I would do here is I would use test1. All right. Now I can use test1 because I already have a test1 database created. What happens if you need to create a database? You will actually type in create database. Okay, there is a spelling mistake here. Yes, database. Say for example, XYZ. All right. Create database XYZ. A database has been created, and now if we do show tables, can you see we've got a new database created here, which is XYZ. Now, as you can see, I actually created something and I changed the basic structure of my database. My database initially had like 6 databases. Now it has 7 databases. So this creation of database, this particular create statement is actually a part of DDL, because we are able to change the structure of our data or database using this particular statement. All right. Next, after creating the database, we need to use the database. So how are we going to use the database? Okay, just 1 minute. Which one is easier to learn? Actually, both of them are easy to learn. There is, I guess, Pradeep, you are asking about Oracle and MySQL. Both Oracle and MySQL are easy to learn because they both use basic SQL syntax. So if you know the basic SQL syntax, you've basically learned Oracle, MySQL, and SQL Server. All right, so let's use our database here. We're going to use the database test1. All right, so it's as simple as that. What I'll do is, before going forward, let me just scroll up so that the rest of the content can be seen. Yes, use test1. So as you can see, now my database has changed. That means that whatever I create or whatever data I insert further on throughout this whole session is going to be put up into the test1 database. All right. Hello everyone. There are a few new people here. Okay. 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 Fine then. Sorry about that. Okay. So next, let us create a table. Why are we creating a table? Because obviously, if we want to insert some data, there has to be some existing table, right? We currently don't have any tables here. So we're creating that table. Now, how do we create the table? We create the table using the create table name query. All right, so as you can see, I've actually used the table keyword here. The reason I wrote table name there is just to give you a placeholder where the name of the table will actually pop up. So let my table name be employee. All right, now what happens if I click enter? MySQL is very good. Till you don't actually cause a problem and try to execute a wrong query, it will keep giving you this arrow. Why does it keep giving you this arrow? Because MySQL is optimistic. कि there is some other data that is coming up next which will complete the query here, right? So currently our query is incomplete. In order to complete it, what MySQL does is it gives us the next line such that we can actually go and complete the query given here. So let us complete the query. Let us add in a certain set of attributes with their related, what is that, databases, sorry, data types. All right, so let's say first name, let it be a varchar of 20. Let's say we've got our next, which is last name, last name. So this might take a certain amount of time, and also it might create a few problems in between, as you just saw. So just bear with me for like a couple of minutes here. Varchar of 20, age, integer, mobile number, char of 10, and let our last column be salary, which again we might keep as integer. All right. So this is our table where we've got first name, which will take in 20 characters, last name, which will take in 20 characters, age, which is an integer, mobile number, that is a character of 10 elements, and salary, which is again an integer. Now the reason that we've put in mobile number as a character of 10 values is because it requires less space, right? Because we know for a fact that we've got digits from 0 to 9, and we need to have 10 characters in any mobile number, all of which are going to be digits only, right? So this is just a simpler way of storing data in the database, wherein you are not trying to increase the value, or you're not trying to increase the space that is allocated to a particular given value. You're trying to reduce it as far as possible while still maintaining the integrity of the data. Now, as you can see, we've got a query OK and 0 rows affected stated here. That is actually the result of the query being executed. So the query is executed perfectly. That's why it's given as query OK. If there were errors, it would actually display the errors here. Now, please note, it is not necessary that you keep getting these query OKs each and every time you execute a query for the first time. There is a lot of practice that goes into this, so seriously don't be disheartened, or don't be demotivated if you keep getting errors. You learn from those errors. All right, so okay, there are a few new students here. Who are these? Tech or Facts. Okay, hi Tech or Facts, Pradyuman and Muhammad and Paila, I hope I'm reading that right, and Himanshu. Okay, so we've got a lot of students today compared to our last live sessions. Any which ways, let's continue. So here we've got our table created. Now let's just quickly see how these tables were created. So what is the structure of the table? The structure of the table can be seen using the description query. So we just write DSC and the name of the table. So what does this do? It actually gives us a complete structure of how the table was created. So currently, since we've not put any keys or we've not put any constraints here, we've got all nulls as yes, because we've allowed nulls here. We've not put a not null constraint anywhere or any such thing. We've just created a simple basic table. We've got 5 columns in that particular table, and the data types of all of the 5 columns have been set here. All right, so now we come up to the main part of our demonstration, which is the actual insert query. Now, how do we write the insert query? We write the insert query as insert into table name. So here our table name is employee, and then we put up our set of columns. So first name, last name, age, mobile number. Okay, no, it was NO, right? Yes, mobile number and salary, right? So we've put all of our columns here, and then we write values. Remember, it's values. The moment you write value, it will give you an error. We'll do that once and we'll see what is the error that comes up. Okay, so for now, we just write values and then we put up our actual values. So whenever you're putting up strings, or varchars in this particular case, please make sure that you're putting up these single quotes here. So let me just take up some first names and last names from this particular chat here, some small ones, so that you know. Okay, so I've got a very small first name here. Thank you, Ravi. And let me take a very small, another small. Okay, then okay, so I have just commanded your first names and last names majorly because I require first names and last names here, and yours were the shortest to write. All right, so next let's look at the age. So this is a fictional person, right? Fictional person here. Their age is currently 32. Let their mobile number be some 10-digit number, so we just type in 10 numbers starting with 9, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, because mobile numbers have to be 10 digits long. And let their salary be, say for example, 40,000. Okay, so this is our query. Let's see if it executes. Now, can you see what has happened here? We've got a query, okay. That means this query has been executed, and we've got one row affected. Why is it giving one row affected? Because in our table, one row has now been inserted. All right, this is what this is stating, that in our query or in our table, one row has been inserted. Now, how do we see that? We simply type select star from whatever your table name is. Please note, I'm actually stating this. This is the worst way to fire a select query, okay? Using this star here is one of the worst ways to fire a query. The reason I'm doing this here, even after telling you this, is because this is the most expedite way in which I can show you the table instantaneously. Okay, so just do this for testing. Try never to do it for any other purpose. All right, so select star from employees actually gives us all of the attributes of the employees, of all of the employees in the table, right? So we've just got select star from employees. We've inserted one record, and that is why one record is shown here. Okay, next let us see what happens if we don't put values. Instead, if we just write value, it's still coming up. Why is it coming up? Because recently what MySQL did was, there were a lot of people having these problems, and they removed that clause wherein s has to be put in. So even if it is values, now MySQL is intelligent enough to understand that this is what is going on. So if you now look at your table, it has two records having the exact same data because both of these records got affected. All right, now this particular way of writing the query is extremely good because there is no confusion about exactly what your column names are going to be and what the related values are going to be. Where does the problem come in? The problem comes in a real life scenario wherein you have to constantly keep updating records, and these records are such that they have 20 column names, 40 column names, 100 column names. These are real life databases, bulky databases which have these many column names in it, right? So what do you do in that case? You can actually also insert tables. Just give me a minute there. Yes, you can actually also insert records into the table without using this column name set. The only clause is that you need to ensure that you're putting in all of the values. Here you can't be selective that maybe I won't put the age or maybe I won't put the salary. That is not a luxury that you have. All right, you have to put in all of the names here. So let me just quickly change some of the values here so that we can see a change. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Okay. And let the salary be 42,000. Can you see? Again, one row affected. So even without the set of column names, we are still getting an insertion into the table because we have inserted all of the values required by the table. Let's try to not put certain values that are required by the table. So for example, if I do not put the salary, what happens? Can you see? So the table requires 5 values, right? For each and every row, I've just put in 4. So it says that the column count does not match. So because the column count does not match, we would not get an insertion. So what do we do if we require to insert just the first name, last name and mobile number? I Suppose I don't want to disclose my salary, or if I don't want to disclose my age, then what you do is you put in your column names. All right, and you put in selective column names. So since I do not want to display, or I do not want to disclose my salary, and I do not want to disclose my age, this is what I'll put up in my column name list, right? So I just want to disclose the first name, the last name, and the mobile number. And similarly, even in the values, we will just put in the required data, namely the first name, the last name, and the mobile number. Let me just change a few records here so that let's see if it's 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay. Let me change the age here because we do not require it. And lastly, we've got the name. Let's change it to Odin. And let's change this to Raji. Okay. So we've got a new set of records. Let's see if this executes. And can you see now it's executed? So because of this, what does the table now look like? Can you see? So we've got Raji, Odin, a person who has just disclosed their mobile number and not their age and not their salary. Because we do not have any not null constraints here, this is acceptable for this particular table. Please note that this is not something that you are encouraged to do, but it is a possibility when it comes to insert statements. All right, so these were the two ways in which you can use insert statement. Now I kept talking about three ways, right? Three ways of using insert statements. Sorry. So what are these three ways of using insert statement? What is the last way of using insert statement? It is inserting records into a table that already exists in another table. Right, so suppose we have a certain set of records that are already available in one table, and for some reason we want to port those records to another table. There could be multiple reasons. Maybe I just want a separate table having records of the employees whose salaries are greater than 50,000. Right, so I want all of those records to be in a separate table. Or there could be some requirement wherein I want all of my close to retirement age employees set up in a separate table. So because of all of these reasons, I might want to duplicate records across tables. It is not an advisable practice, but this is a need that might crop up. So there are two ways of doing this. Either we can take each and every record and keep updating it into the new table. It's very tedious because you might have lakhs of employees of such types. The second one is doing it in batch. So let us see how we can do that. Let us first create a table. Let me just recycle my create table code. So let us create an employee2 table. Let us create the table in the exact same manner. So we've got first name, we've got last name, we've got age, we've got mobile number, and we've got salary. All right, so we've got the exact same table. What am I going to do? I am going to selectively remove some records and I'm going to store them into my table. So first let us create the table. Now that we've created the table, let us see what is there in the table. So if we simply execute the select query, right, a simple execution of the select query for employee2 is going to tell us that this particular table is completely empty. That is why we're getting the empty set here, right? Sorry, I'm very sorry about that. So how do we now insert the records? Now for the purpose of this particular example, let us say we want to insert records into the new table wherever the first name is Ravi. So ideally, two of the records, the first two records, should also be inserted into our new table. Let us see how we can write this query actually. So we write insert into employee2, right? And after this, what we normally do is we write a set of column names, we write values, and we write a set of values. What we are going to do here is actually write down a select query. All right. So insert into employee2, select all the records from employee table where first name is equal to, I'm sorry about that. Okay, so the whole thing got deleted. Let me just quickly type that again. Insert into employee 2, select star from employee where first name is equal to, what was that? Ravi. Yes. All right. Let us try and execute this now. Can you see what has happened? It says query OK and two rows have been affected. Now, initially, our employee table did not have any data in it. Now, let us see what happens to the employee table. Can you see? The table records exist in employee also. They've not vanished from there. But because we've done this kind of an insert statement wherein we are selecting data from a particular table and then using it as the set insert for another table, we are able to now batch update or batch insert records into a particular table. Now, there is only one clause that you need to remember here, and that is that the number of columns that you're putting up in your new table and the number of columns that you're putting up from your old table, they have to match each other. This means that the number of columns have to be the same, and also the data types and positions of the columns have to be the same, the exact same. All right, so let us fire another insert query here. Let us say we are firing an insert query of this particular sort. First name, there is a spelling mistake here, comma, last name, and we say select star from employee, sorry, and we want to insert just the first name, sorry, or we'll do a wrong query and show you exactly what happens here, is equal to Raji. Okay, so ideally what we're thinking about here is that Raji has to be included into this particular table. Let's see if that happens. It does not happen. Why does it not happen? Because here the star means that 5 of the columns have been selected, whereas the employee says that only 2 of the records have to be inserted or 2 of the columns have to be updated. So these number of columns here have to match both number and data type of these columns here. Also the position. So first name and first name should be on the same position. Last name and last name should be on the same position. I'm not talking about the names, all right? I'm just talking about the database and the position of where you want what to go. So I hope no one has any issues with insert here so that we can go on to the next topic. If you do, please quickly write, okay, my is a name. Huh? Okay. What is the difference between varchar or varchar2? Varchar or varchar2 are actually used in two different say what is that called, interfaces. Yes, so varchar 2 is commonly used, most commonly used, it's a advanced version of varchar. Actually, it's most commonly used with Oracle. If you're using it in MySQL, you will get errors because MySQL till date I don't think has varchar. At least I've never used varchar 2 with MySQL, because whenever I tried to use it, it always gave me an error that this particular type of uh, data type does not exist. So these are very minute changes, like data type based changes or something between Oracle and MySQL. The data types might differ, the way in which you're writing the syntax, like with semicolon, without semicolon, might differ, but the basic logic of SQL still remains the same. All right, so we've actually taken up a lot of time with insert. Let us quickly go on to update statements. Now, what does update statement do? It helps us in updating any and all kinds of data that are there in the existing tuples of the table. Please note, update statement can only update an existing data. If you're trying to insert a new data, or if you're trying to modify a non-existent data, it won't work. All right, now as we've seen with insert statement, in insert statement at any given time, if we are not doing batch insertion of data from one table to the other, we constantly get a message of one row updated. That is because insert by default has the capability of inserting itself into only one record. of the table. But with update statements, what happens is multiple records of the table will get affected because update statement uses the where clause. So there is a where condition given with the update statement that says exactly on the basis of which condition is the update supposed to be made. Again, because this particular statement is in MySQL and it's a DML statement, it is going to auto commit by default, right? Let us quickly look at the update statement given here. I know that yes, Ravi Chauhan, you're right. Both are different. Let me just get back to that in some time. Um, so, syntax of update statement, we've got update, which is a keyword, table name, which by now we know is the name of the table that we're trying to update. We've got the set keyword, wherein we're actually setting what needs to be updated. All right, we are going to state two things here: the column name where the data needs to be updated, and the actual value or the equation using which that update has to be made. So we can either set, for example, we can either set the salary equal to say 35,000, or we can set the salary equal to salary plus 5,000. So either we can just straight give a value, or we can give an equation to the column that we want changed here. Lastly, we've got the where condition. Now this where condition works exactly like the where condition in the select query, wherein we put up a condition of which exact records have to be changed or which exact rows have to be modified. So that condition is given here. So without further ado, let us just quickly go on to the hands-on for this. So back we go to our MySQL interface, and here we are. Right? So how do we update query? Let us see, is there anything that we can do with update here? So since employee2 doesn't really have many records, let us just keep using employee, the initial one. Right? So we've got 4 records here. Now what do I want to do? Maybe I want to change the salary of Ravi, right? So I want to change Ravi's salary. Now there are 2 Ravis here. Let them be 2 Ravis there. There is no issue. Let us change the salary such that, because Ravi is such a good employee, what we'll do is we'll change Ravi's salary and we'll make it 5 times more, right? Not 5 times more, we'll just add 5,000 to it. That makes more sense. Making it 5 times more is a very huge value. Okay, so what do? We say update, which is actually a keyword, and we are going to write the name of the table now. So we've got employee, update employee. Next, we have to use the set keyword. What are we setting? We're setting the salary to, for the purpose of this first one, I'll just simply write 5,000. For the next one, we'll use a condition given or an equation given there. All right. So set salary is equal to 45,000, where first name is equal to Ravi. All right, and we execute. So can you see we got 2 rows that were matched? I'll just quickly highlight this. Yes, so we've got 2 rows that were matched and 2 rows that were changed. So this means that we got a match for the condition in 2 rows, right? So this where condition actually selected or identified 2 rows where the first name was Ravi, and then the set operation here or the set equation here was applied to these 2 values. This is what this means, that 2 of the values were matched or 2 of the rows were matched and 2 changes were made. So now what happens to our table? As you can see, what was initially 40,000 has now been converted into 45,000. All right, so be very sure that you are actually understanding what is going on here. All right, let us use another query here, which is another update query only. So let us say update employee set, let's change the last names, set last name. Okay, this is not how it's written, this is how it's written. Set last name is equal to PQR, where first name is equal to Rani. Again, can you see one row was matched and one row was changed? In this manner, actually, what you can do is you can also put in, now currently we have a very minute set of records here. If you add in more records, you could also have records wherein you were trying to, say for example, change the name or change the salary of all of the people who are earning less than 30,000, or you could change the mobile numbers as and when you required. In short, what is going on here is based upon a certain condition, a certain value is being changed, right? So this is what your update statements do. One thing that I would actually recommend you doing here is be very careful of this particular where clause. Okay, whenever you're writing down the where clause, be very sure that there is no ambiguity. Can anyone tell me what ambiguity is? I hope you all know what ambiguity is. Yes? Okay. All right. Any I don't really have any answers about ambiguity here. All right. So let's see. Let's wait for a couple of yes. Yes, that's great. Yeah. So ambiguity is confusion. Okay. Ambiguity is confusion. Now, what does this confusion mean? Why am I saying that the where condition should not have any confusion? Think about it in this manner. What I want to do is I want to extract data, or I want to modify the ages of all of the people who are currently between the ages of 18 to 60. So how will the where condition be? The where condition being specific. Oh no, 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 no. Ambiguity is the opposite of specific. All right. So ambiguity means confusion. You being unspecific is what ambiguity is. Let's take an example and understand this. We've got an age and I want to select, or I want to change something in such a manner that I want to select all of those records where the age is between 18 to 60. So ideally the age should be greater than or equal to 18 and less than or equal to 60, right? But when I'm writing my where condition, what I actually do is I write age, no, wait, yes, uh, there seems to be some problem here. Oh, that is because I've written this wrong. Let me just quickly change that. So what I wanted was age should be less than or equal to 18 and less than or equal to 60. Yes, now it is going to make sense. So while I'm writing my actual where clause, see, this is what ambiguity is. While I'm writing my actual where clause, I flip the signs. I end up writing that the age is, say for example, less than or equal to 18, and the age that I'm considering is greater than or equal to 60. Now, can you see what has happened here? It is the exact opposite of what was required. So this particular clause that I've written, or this particular condition that I wrote in the end within my where condition for update, was the complete opposite of what I've written. Right? Now, in a scenario like in MySQL where commit is auto commit in nature, all of my data will be changed according to this particular where clause. So whatever meaningful data I had initially, all of that is lost. All because of this tiny, tiny ambiguity in the conditions here, right? So be very sure while you're actually executing the update statement that your where condition is very proper. This is one of the reasons why auto commit is normally set to false in any kind of database activity or transaction, so that you can prevent these kind of problems. If your auto commit is set to true, each and every one of these ambiguous, now see, this is not a syntactical error, it's a logical, it's a semantic error here, and this needs to be avoided at any cost. So if you are at auto commit, what happens here is this particular query will get executed and all of your required data will be lost. right? So what we do normally is we put all of our databases onto autocommit false, wherein there is no autocommit. And after we are clear or after we are satisfied with whatever output we are getting, we then commit all of our queries. So thereby we are first checking whether what we required is what has happened, and then we are saving all of those changes to the database. So again, I'm iterating, be very, very careful of this where clause while you're using update statements. All right. Anyone having any doubt now? Yes. Ambiguity. No, ambiguity is not being specific. Please make sure that you're checking. Yes. Bodhisatta Das. Yes, yes, you're right there. It means anything that has more than one interpretation. So, multiple different interpretations is what ambiguity is. Ravi Chauhan, we use varchar. Most of the time, we end up using varchar while we're using MySQL. When we use Oracle, we tend to use varchar 2, right? So varchar 2 is actually an advanced version of varchar. It literally does. There are no. I would say just the fact that the capacity of varchar to store data and extend itself to newer values coming in a variable form is more. Apart from that, there is no real difference between varchar and varchar 2. As far as I've seen in my whole experience till now, um, varchar is mostly used with MySQL. I've never been able to use varchar 2 with MySQL. On the other hand, Oracle works favorably with varchar 2 instead of varchar. Okay, yes. Semantic error, yes. All right. Next, let us go to delete statements. So, what are delete statements? Delete statements are all of those statements that actually help us remove data from the database. These are the most dangerous kind of DML statements, and we'll see why they are so dangerous. So let us first see what they do. They remove existing content from the table, and they remove this content not cell wise, they remove this content row wise. Again, there is a where condition in delete statements also, because of which multiple rows or multiple tuples might get affected by any delete statement that we're doing. And the reason I look so scared currently is because delete statement is a very scary topic. I'll show you why in just a minute. Lastly, if we look here, again being a DML statement, MySQL says that even delete statement is going to be autocommit to true. So delete statement being autocommit to true is very, very scary. When I actually show you a demonstration for it, you'll understand why it is so scary. So let's just go quickly onto the syntax and then we'll move on to the demonstration. So here the syntax is very simple. Delete from table name. Now this delete is a keyword, the from is a keyword, and table name is whatever your table is. Where is a keyword, and then comes the condition where you need to exactly match which records have to be deleted. Now the first reason why this is very dangerous is because there are no column names here. So as soon as you fire a query, all of your records, wherever the condition matches, will be deleted, right? Now, in many cases or in many of the reference material that you see, you'll find that this where is put in angle brackets like this. Now, what is the reason for that? It's very simple. They're saying that the where condition is optional in nature, and this optionality actually makes delete statements even more dangerous. Just wait for 2 minutes and I'll explain exactly why they are so dangerous. Okay, so let's go quickly onto the hands-on. Now that we've understood what the syntax of the delete statement is, let us say we want to delete records. We are again using the same employee table and we are completely fed up of seeing two Ravi records from here. So what we're going to do is we are going to completely remove those Ravi records. So we are deleting from the table. Okay, instead of table, we're supposed to write the name of the table, and we'll put in a where clause. First name is equal to name is equal to, say, Ravi. All because I do not want two Ravis, so I'm removing both the Ravis from here. So what happens when I press on execute? Can you see two rows affected? Now what has happened here? The where condition has identified the records having Ravi as the first name, and all of the values that were there for those particular records have been completely removed from your database. So what happens to your database? You end up with this kind of a database wherein you've got these two records, Rani and Raji, right? So we purposely went and did this with a clause. Now imagine this. What happens if this where condition was ambiguous in nature? What happens if this where condition was not written properly? Records that you did not want to lose have now been lost. That is why the delete statement is very dangerous, and it's one of the least used DML statements that are there in real life. All right, we'll be seeing what is the alternative to using delete statements also in just 2 minutes. Now, next, let us look at what happens to make this delete statement even more dangerous. That is when we try to completely remove the where clause from a delete statement. What happens if you completely try to remove the where clause from the delete statement? Ideally, what many of us think is that because there's no where clause, there won't be any matching. Since there's no matching, there will not be any deletion. We are not so lucky. What happens here is actually delete statement is the best of friends. Conditions don't matter then. Without any discrimination, all of the data that is present in your table will be deleted if there is no specific where clause given. So can you see currently, because we deleted or because we executed a delete statement without any where condition, all of the rows that were initially a part of our table have now been deleted. So we have no records left with us. So as you can see, every time you're deleting records from the table, you are actually completely losing data. That is why delete statements are not used. Now, I just require a specific answer from all of you. How many of you know the record rules? How many of you know the rules about record? These are actually rules that are set down by the government of each and every country based upon what kind of organization it is making these rules for. So what these particular rules state actually are very simple, that certain records have to be preserved for certain periods of time. So the period of time is generally described as 5 to 10 years based upon what kind of record it is. So if it is a school or a university or some kind of educational record, it would go on to 10 years. If it is a manufacturing record, it could be 5 years. If it is a legal record, it could be even more, 20 years. All right, so these are some of the records that have to be maintained in a handy manner whenever you've got any record. So what happens when you try to, when you're no longer using these things? So let us look at a practical example of this. What happens if you've got a scenario wherein you no longer require data? So let us consider a particular example where we've got a manufacturing company, and this company manufactures some gears. All right. Just bear with me for the spelling of gears. No, this is not the right spelling. Gears. Okay. This is the spelling of gears. Okay. So this manufacturing company actually manufactures some gears. So it's manufacturing 1D type gear, 2X type gear, and 3A type gear. Now, for some reason, because of manufacturing costs or because of, machinery costs or some such, this particular type of gear stopped getting manufactured. Now, what does the manufacturer do? Does the manufacturer just delete this record from the table? Yes, the manufacturer can obviously do that. Just delete the record from the table. Be happy. What is the problem? The problem is, if 3 years down the line, there is an incident wherein some machinery having this particular gear, which the company no longer manufactures, there 3 years later, some machinery having this non-manufactured or discontinued gear has an accident, and there is a complete investigation on where the gear was created, how the gear was created, what were the materials used, etc. So what is the first point of contact? The manufacturing company. So the investigators come after 3 years to the manufacturing company, and the manufacturing company says, we don't know. We deleted all of those records. We no longer have those records. So what do you do at that point of time? That is not something that should be done, right? There was an accident, there is an investigation, and everyone is expecting answers. So that is why most countries have put in these record laws. You need to maintain records of each and every interaction that is a part of your organization, right? So how do you manage all of the records that you no longer use? What we do is, instead of using the delete statement, we end up using the update statement. What we do is we add a record always. Whenever we create any table, we always add a status column to it. Now the name of this column would be somewhere different depending upon who is creating the database, or depending upon where the database is getting created, things like that. But the basic meaning of the data remains the same. What does the status record do? It actually defines whether or not a particular gear is actively being manufactured or not being manufactured. So we are not deleting the records. If 3A is no longer being manufactured, we'll simply change the status of 3A and preserve the rest of the required records from 3A. What does this help with? 3 years later, if someone comes up with a manufacturing incident, the manufacturer has all of the records handy, plus proof that we no longer manufacture this type of a gear, right? So this is what we do. Instead of deleting records from our table due to whatever reason, we try to update their status. Now since this was a manufacturing table, we updated it to manufacturing or not manufacturing. If it was a student table, we could have say for example, admitted or admission cancelled as the status. If this were an employee table, we could have, say for example, current employee, a retired employee, or a resigned employee. Some such status change that will actually show that the record still exists with us but is no longer in active circulation. So what happens when you try to do other calculations or other retrievals? You form your data in such a manner that it is going to only reflect the manufactured gears. All right, so you exclude all of the non-manufactured gears. So what you can do is you can write queries of the type. Just give me a minute. Let me clear the screen here quickly. Yes, you can write queries like, if I want to just have a look at all of the gears, for example, which are being currently manufactured or actively being sold by the industry or the company, I can simply fire a query of select some set of column names from whatever table might be there, where status is equal to manufacturing, right? So here all of those records or all of those parts or all of those things which are no longer in circulation will completely be left out, and only those which are in circulation will be left in and can be utilized for the rest of the purposes. So this is how we try to avoid delete statements as far as possible, by shifting the functionalities from delete to update. Anyone having any doubts with this? If you set rollback, yes, you can roll back, but for that, first you need to ensure that you have transaction control. So let me just quickly go through all of these. All right. Yes, Faryad, both do work in Oracle, but as I said, Oracle works more favorably. It means Oracle is just a slight bit partial towards varchar 2. It just works a lot better, like processing wise. Okay, it's not something that would cause any problem to us. Let me just quickly go through all of the chats here, because we're done with our session. So if anyone has any doubts here, just before the summary, let me quickly go through the chats here. All right, hello Ankit. Okay, yes, I guess that is it. Okay, Faryad, rollback is possible after delete if and only if your auto commit is not set to true. All right. So MySQL by default, your auto commits are set to true. Oracle by default, they are set to false. So in Oracle, you will not be committing automatically. In MySQL, every time you execute a query, you are automatically committing that particular result into your database. So that is where it will create a problem. So you never know what kind of databases are being used, right? So it's always better to avoid delete statements completely and try to use update statements instead, like in an industry environment. All right. Yes. Thank you so much, Ambrose. That's a compliment here. All right. Okay. Fine then. So if no one has any other doubts, let us just quickly take a quick summary of the whole session that we've gone through. So we saw initially what the DML statements were, what were the different types of DML statements, and what was the difference between the DML statement and the DDL statement. Remember, it's a very tiny difference, but it makes a huge impact on your database. DML statements are only allowed to manipulate data, whereas DDL statements can actually manipulate the whole structure. Structure, yes. So we need to be very careful while we're actually executing DML and DDL statements because of this reason. Next, we've got the insert statements. In insert statements, we saw three types of insert statements. One, where we had the column names as well as the values. Next, we have seen a type of insert statement where we've got only the values, and lastly we've seen an insert statement which has insert keyword as well as the select keyword given in it. So this is more of a batch insertion, right? So the column names are ideally utilized when we are required to insert a certain set of values into a certain set number of columns. If we are required to attach all the values of all of the columns into a table, it is better to use just values, less amount of time required for it. And lastly, if we want to copy and paste basically data from one table to the other, we can actually use the select form of it. Another thing that I would like to actually identify here is the fact that this particular batch update can also be done between databases. So if you have two separate tables in two different databases such that you want to transfer a complete set of data from one table in one database to another table in another database, you can also do that here. You just need to give the database dot table name reference here. All right, or in some cases you'll have to give the database dot dbo dot table reference based upon what kind of system you're using. If you're using MySQL, you can just use database dot table name. If you're using SQL server, you will obviously have to use dbo dot table name. All right. Next, we saw the update statement. In the update statement, we've seen how we can actually update entities using the where clause. We need to be very, very careful about this where clause because any ambiguity or any confusions here regarding the possible interpretations or any confusions regarding how the condition has been set will actually lead to a complete loss of whatever was meaningful data for you, right? So please make sure that you're taking care of the where condition here. Lastly, we saw the delete statement, which we try to avoid as far as possible. Delete statement, delete complete records without any discrimination. Complete records would be deleted from our table based upon the where condition, and if there is no where condition, then there is no discrimination whatsoever and all of the records of the table are deleted. So we actually do not use the delete table 99% of the time in the industry. Sorry, we do not use the delete query 99% of the time in the industry, majorly because it hurts the database if there are any confusions either with the where clause or if a user misses out on the where clause. So what do we do instead? We translate all of the functionalities of the delete into an update. We try to retire the records by updating the status to a retired or non-useful or non-circulatory status. And later on, all of the other records will be created, or the other queries will be created in such a manner that they will always have a where clause excluding all of the non-required data from the tables. I hope all of you have had a wonderful session here. Structure refers to table structure. Yes, it could refer, Ambrose, it could refer to table structure. It could refer to database structure on the whole. So if you're creating a table, that is a complete structural change. If you're creating, say for example, if you're creating, for that matter, an attribute, a new attribute or a new column in a table, that is also a structural change. So whenever you've got a change in the complete structure of any of the entities, you can have, like I am just stating this, if you have triggers, so you're creating a trigger, you're creating a function, if you're doing any of these things, like you're creating newer entities or you're modifying the entity as a whole, not just the data within it, the whole entity, if you're modifying it or creating or deleting it in some way or the other, such that the database shape changes, right? So think about the database as a map where you have various tables connected to each other. So if the database shape is changing due to whatever you're doing, then that is known as a structural change, and that is something only data definition language can do. If you're just changing the data within your database, right, just the basic data, say your first name or say last name, if that data is changed, there is no change in the shape of the structure of the database. So that is done by the DML statements. So I hope all of you have understood all of these, right? Any other doubts? Okay, let me just quickly look into all of your records. Just give me a moment there. One, two. Okay, what is the difference between delete and truncate? Okay, so there is a very tiny difference between delete and truncate, Faryad. When we say, let me just clear the screen very quickly so that I can explain this. When we say delete, delete has some consigns. All right, I'll just quickly write this again. We've got delete, which has some consigns, because delete has a condition. At least it has the contingency to have a condition, right? A where clause. Whereas truncate does not have that consigns. Delete will delete as far as possible on the basis of where. If the programmer does not have a consigns and does not write where, or if the programmer misses out and does not write where, that is the only time when delete is going to delete all of the records. On the other hand, truncate, irrespective of who, what, when, where, why is executing it, will delete all of the records of the table. All right, this is one of the major differences between delete and truncate. Delete has a contingency for a consigns. Delete has a place where you can set up a condition, right? Whereas on the other hand, truncate does not have any place to set up conditions exactly. When is the next session? I will have to see to it. If you people require a new session, I would actually recommend that you put down all of those requests in the chat here. Also, along with the requests, I would recommend that you put down a list of what topics you might like as a part of your session, all right? So please make sure that you're commenting here about how the session was, and also about what you would like to see in the next session, right? So that is it, and I'm logging off for this session. Thank you so much.